Hello everyone and welcome back to Wordle project, and this is part 3 of our project. And now that we have an understanding of how Laravel works, just small understanding of Vue.js, and now it's a good time to continue with our project and start working on things that we had. And also, before you go on, make sure that you are running PHP Artisan Serve on whatever port that you like, and also you are running npm run dev, so everything that you write inside your Vue components will be compiled. And also you can have an extra uh, tab here for writing any other PHP Artisan command that you want. And also I'm going to hit Control plus to zoom in a little even more, because uh, if you are watching this video with a mobile device or smaller devices, I think zoom in is a little better for you. So we can also use Control J to open and close this terminal here with VS Code. So that's also something to have in mind as well. And also, this is the welcome page that we are trying to design. This is the welcome thing that we have. And also there's something else I want to mention before we go on. This dashboard, profile, and this auth pages, I only wanted you, so since this is an educational course, I just wanted you to see them and see that they actually exist and they come in with Laravel and they're very handy. You can check them out. But for this case, we do not need them, so we can actually go ahead and let's for now just comment them out. And here we can only use route and landing controller, and we do not need any other thing here. So since we are commenting them out, so we only need route and things here. And also let's just clean them because we have that. I don't want to comment them out because we have that in our previous commits in our Git history, so we can actually find them if we wanted them one day. We can find that in Git history. So let's hit Control S, and you can see there's changes that are being tracked by Git here. We can see them inside this section here. So now that we have a route for our GET request, and we are passing a variable called test and things like that. And also there's something that I want to mention. There's a method called compact in PHP. Okay, well, compact does the same thing as this. If I write compact, for example, test, you can see that it creates an array. We can actually dump and die this compact and creates this exact array that we want. So you can see that so many people, I can hit refresh and this is it. You can see that so many people here, rather than writing this, they actually use compact here, because in compact you can write down the name of the variables that you want, whatever that you want, test or x or y or things like that, any variable that you want. So I'm going to use compact because I think compact is more convenient way for this thing that we have here. So go ahead, render welcome view page, and these are the variables that you need to have. And if I wanted, I can comma separate it and provide more argument if I want to. So here for start, we are going to just design the Wordle page that we have. For example, it is going to be, for example, we are going to start with 5 character. So I'm going to just design the front end of our project that we have. So for start, we are going to create a h1 tag. Okay, for start, sorry. We are going to have a h1 tag, and this h1 tag is going to be word L is going to be the name of the project that we have. And after Wordle that we have, we are going to have a div. So this customization box that you can customize the number of the characters, it's something that we may want to add in future, but for now we just default to 5 character length. So we assume that the length of our code is 5 characters. So let's continue with that. We create a div here, and this div is going to be for all the inputs that we have, and there's going to be 6, so the player can have 6 guesses, and also we can provide that from controller. For now, we write that hard code with hard codedly like that, the total and number of guesses is going to be 6 for start. Okay, but for now I'm just writing 6 like this, but in future we can read that from database, we can read that from a config file or whatever that we want. So the first real variable that we want is total number of guesses, and it's going to be 6 by default. And I saw that whether you have 10 characters or 8 or 12 or 6 or 5, you are always going to have 6 guesses, whatever letter that you have. So we are going to continue with 6, but for now we're writing it like hard coded, and for future we might go change it. So for the props, we are going to have a total number of guesses. The type is going to be a number, and we are going to set even a default value for that. If anything is not provided, default value is going to be 6. So if you do not pass anything, the default value is going to be 6. And we can also write a validator. For example, we can validate the things that we have. We can say go ahead, validate. So let's search that. I don't remember how the syntax exactly was. Validate props VueJS. We can actually validate props. Okay. We can say it needs to be inside an array. It needs to be a different way. So as you can see, it says props. The title is going to be a string, and so many things. So validate. Let's search for validations, prop validation, and here you can see that there's a validator, which is a function like that, and we can go ahead use the validator if you want to, but it is something that I wanted to mention. We can actually use validation, but since we are preparing for backend and some validations is going to be there, I don't think it's that necessary. It's necessary for now, but I just wanted to mention that there's a possibility we can actually run validator and see and validate that and say it has to be number and things like that. So okay, we have total number of guesses. So now that we have total number of guesses, we are going to have another character, because for now it's 5, but in future we may change the number of letters to 6, 7, 8. So I can create another variable called number of letters, and the number of letters for now is going to be 5. So come back here and provide that as an argument as well. So inside welcome.js, we are going to create another thing here. And if you wonder how, there's something called duplicate line. When I hit Control-Shift-D in VS Code, it duplicates lines. But for you, I don't think that is going to happen, because I have already configured this shortcut command. If you hit Control-Shift-P and search for duplicate selection, you can see that I previously assigned Control-Shift-D to this command, but for you there is no shortcut attached to this command, so you can actually click on setting. But Control-Shift-D was previously attached to something else. I now use Control-Alt-D for that. It runs the run the debug. I set the Control-Alt-D for the debug run, removed Control-Shift-D for that, and set the Control-Shift-D to the duplicate lane. So this is something that I've changed about my VS Code configuration, and I wanted to mention that. So if I hit Control-Shift-D here, you can see it duplicates the selection, so I don't need to hit Control-C and hit Control-V again, so I can just run one time. So now I can hit Control-V, and also when you use Control-Shift-D, the thing that you had in your clipboard, because I already copied this number of letters in my clipboard. If I wanted to use Control-C and Control-V, this would have been deleted from my clipboard. But even though it's no worry, I have already installed something for my computer. If I hit Start and V in Windows, by default, there are everything that was previously in your clipboard. You can see them and use them if you want to in Windows. So, and the default value for that is going to be 5. For now, and we have number of letters and total number of guesses. So now that we have them, we are going to create input for that. So there's a div. I'm going to give it a class, and I call it, for example, inputs. Okay, it is going to be inputs, and we are going to have, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, and six input rows. So I'm going to say div dot input row, div with a class of input row, and I can say 1, 2, 3, but of course this is not a good idea if you repeat them 6 times. Of course, we need to generate that dynamically with a for loop. So here, how can we actually create a for loop? Imagine that we have an array. How can we, for example, define variables in Vue.js? Although there is a script with a section, a script with a setup, a script section with a setup, we can create also another script, okay, script with export default. What does this export default do? I'm going to explain in a moment, but for now there are some sections in export default that we can use. For example, one of them is going to be data section, and data is going to be a function, so that method, so that's why this is the way that we can actually run data. And data is a function which returns an object, and in this data object we can run whatever that we want, declare any variable that we want. For example, we can declare a test variable, and the value is going to be we do not need to write that in single quotes. We can say test equals to, for example, hello, and we can say, for example, create another variable called n equals, for example, to 5. For example, another variable called, for example, pi equals to 3.14. So we can go ahead and define any variable that we want. Now that in data section we created these, now here we inside our template section we have access to them. For example, we can say let's take a look at test variable. Or we can say, for example, a HR tag, and let's take a look at pi variable. And if you come back here in our code, you can see without needing to refresh the page, it's we now see the result. So, and also there's something that we can do. We can actually open this thing here inside our VS Code, would it be a good idea or not? No, let's use Google Chrome. It's not going to be a great idea. So I'm going to make it a little smaller so that we can see changes there. For example, if I write down another HR tag and hit Control S to save that, and you can also turn on autosave if you want to, but I don't want autosave. I like it without autosave. You can see the changes dynamically. For example, I can write down the N. As you can see, now we can dynamically see the changes there. So that's why I made my editor a little smaller so we can see the changes there. So now that we know what this data section is used for, and we at future we can see that there are some other sections as well. We can say mounted section, created section, I don't know, a lot of other things. And also we can create a props section which does the same thing as define props. We might see in future. So just have in mind that data is not the only section that we can add in export default here. There are a lot of other things that we can add. And we are going to use something else rather than export default in future, probably, and also have that in mind. Don't worry, but let's continue the work. So we wanted to create, repeat that piece of code 6 times or 7 times and things like that. We can go ahead and actually create an array from for example, like range and from 1 to 3 and 6, but Vue.js is actually very smart. For example, if I say v4, okay, v4, and say, for example, you choose something, for example, I in 6. This 6 means create an array, okay, from let's see the result, and you can see the code and write down the only I and only and with a HR tag so that you can see that. Write down, so, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is now generated. So actually this must be an array. When we are using v4, this part is going to be an array, and this is going to be the values inside that array, and we can actually loop through an array. But when you use an integer, Vue.js is smart enough to create a range from 1 to that number that we created. For example, for test, we can say actually here, for example, say x, y, for example, 1, 2, 3. This is an array, right? Hit Control S and we can see, but also there's something that we need to have in mind as well. No, I didn't hit Control S. Yeah. So as you can see, x, y, 1, 2, 3 is generated here. And also there's something that we need to have in mind. We can also loop through objects rather than arrays. For example, we can say name is, for example, Ali. For example, L name, for example, is Saifi, and some other things that. But for this case, we are going to have two. We are going to have a key and a value. So we are going to say key and val, and rather than I, we are going to use key, okay, and with a space, with a dash here, with a b tag and a dash, and we are going to write down the val. So hit Control S, and you can see now this is the changes. Ali name, Saifi L name, and we can see that we do have access to both keys and values for this. So this is the way that we can loop through things. So since we have number of guesses, the total number of guesses is the actually total number of rows. So we can actually say v for I in total number of guesses. So this is the way that it generates an array from 1 to 6. And these are the things that we have. So for example, for test, we can say hello, hello, and a BR tag for test. Sure enough, we can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hellos that we have here. So this is the way that we can, but for every row, we are going to have, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inputs here. Okay, so let's create another loop here. We are going to create a input, okay, input tag. But rather than having, for example, 6 div tags, we are going to have 5 input tags. And again, we are going to say v for example, j in. Well, what was the name of the variable that we used? Was the number of letters. Okay, j in number of letters. We are going to have input type text, and this is it. We are going to have 6 input types. But we are going, of course, to use CSS in order to make it pretty and make it better. So how can we actually use CSS? There's actually, since the whole idea of a component is that we need to create something that can act independently. So that's why everything that this component needs to be written inside this component, whether if it's CSS, JS, HTML, all of them is going to. So we have a script section, a script setup section that usually write at the top. We have a template section, which we write our HTML and we usually write it second, and another script section if you want to. It's not necessarily. Some people only use one script, only use a script setup. Some people only use the second type with export default only. Some people like me, you use both of them. So okay, we are going to create another tag called style tag. We are going to write all our CSS inside that, and we are going to give it something like a scoped, and this scope mean every CSS that I write here should only affect only this component, not other view components. For example, if I say p tag needs to have a font size of something, so it only affects the p tags inside this component. Why? Because I wrote a scoped here. But without this scope, it goes and affects everything that it can. So here we have a inputs tag, inputs class also, and we need to customize it. And inside this inputs tag, we are going to have an inputs row. But I need to write, for example, less or Sass rather than CSS alone. For example, if I say inputs here, for example, say inputs, for example, display flex, give it a display of flex. And also if I say and give it a class, let's give it a class, this input row, which is inside inputs, and also not this inputs row, let's give it a display of flex, and you can see this is how it looks. Let Control 0, and this is how it looks for now. But I'm going to use Sass rather than CSS. So I can set the lang to SCSS. I don't want to use CS, but if I hit Control S and save that, we see an error. It says, hey, you are using Sass, but you haven't installed that. And if we hit Control J so that we can open the terminal, inside Node, we can see that we have an error. It says Sass is not satisfying. We can actually install this Sass with npm install Sass. And we can actually pass in -d for only development. And actually, we can actually copy this thing here and come here inside the other thing that we have. We can actually hit Control V, npm install -d for development Sass. And rather than install, there's actually a shortcut. We can use I rather than so npm I-d Sass. And now we can see the Sass is being installed. And of course, it updates necessary files as well for us. Okay, inside package.json, you can see now the Sass is added to the dev dependencies because we provided that -d flag. When we provide -d flag, it goes inside dev dependencies. Okay, so now we have access to Sass. Now that we have access to Sass, we can actually use Sass. If you haven't worked with Sass previously, it's nothing that different from CSS. If you already know CSS, the understanding lists and Sass is going to be an easy job, and it's not that hard. So the reason that I wanted to use Sass, because Sass is actually very great and easier. For example, here I can say this is the way that I want to use it. For example, say dot inputs. I'm going to add some styles to inputs, and here I write dot inputs inside that. It means go ahead and select the inputs row, which is inside inputs tag. So this is, I think, more convenient. And I can go ahead and say select the inputs. This is one of the benefits of using Sass, when we will see some other benefits for sure. And select the input which is inside input row, which is inside inputs. So we can use with a nested way, and I think this nested way is better in my opinion. So for start, let's have some variables, and this h1 is going to be, let's give it a class of main title. Okay, this is our main title, and we can select the main title that we have and give it some CSS properties. For example, let's increase the font size to 3rem. Okay, this is how 3rem looks like. Let's give it a, for example, text align of center, and this is how text align center looks like. And also, we are going to give it a little bit of padding. For example, 1rem padding. Okay, for sure, good. This is 1rem padding. And also for the inputs, we are going to use 1rem of padding for the inputs as well. So this is it, 1rem of inputs as well. And also we can see, if we hit inspect on this thing that here, you see that this is the div that we have. Let's make that here. So this is the div that we have. Let's make that to the dock to the left. So I think that dock to the left is better for our case, because my picture is on bottom right. So this is the inputs div, and this is each input row, and you can see that purple area is the extra space generated by a thing. So I can select this input row, which has a display of flex, and you control the alignment of these things with justify content. If I set the justify content to center, you can see that this is how it looks, and now the items are at center, and that purple area, you can see the extra space is now distributed somehow that the elements are now centered. So this is it. And now let's customize each input, and each input should have a size. Let's give it a width and a size and things like that. So the width of each input is going to be, for example, let's use, for example, each rem in this case is about 16 pixels, right? Let's, if I use 3rem for the width, let's see how 3rem looks like. This is how 3rem looks like. And I want it to be a little bigger, so let's use 4rem. Sorry, 4rem. The width is going to be 4rem. This is how 4rem looks like, and the height is going to be the same. The height is going to be 4rem as well. So this is the height and this is the width of the element, and we need to do something that user can only type one character inside that, and something that we need to fix for sure. And also, what happens if I want to make that center? For example, this D that we are writing should be centered. What if I want to increase the font size? For example, font size 2rem, to make the font size twice bigger, and I think twice bigger is good. And also, let's give it a padding left, and the reason that I want to give it a padding left, for example 1.5 rem, is that it kind of looks center now at the center. We can type things if you want to, but again, so G, okay. And also let's apply some more CSS properties. For example, I'm going to increase the border width, for example, to 2 pixels. We can write down 2 pixels, or we can write down this I think is 2 pixels. Yeah, well, I think no, this is 4. Yeah, this is 4. So let's just use 2 pixels. Yeah, let's just use 2 pixels. This is going to be the border width. No, I was correct. This was the thing that we had. I thought it's gonna be 4. No, but it was okay. This is the same thing. So, and also we want to have a little bit of a space between them. So if I say gap, for example, let's put the gap to this value, so we can have a little bit gap, but this gap is going to be vertical. So in order to have the gap horizontal, we can use margins if you want to, but if we want to use padding, we need to set the display to flex. So set the display to flex, but if we set the display to flex, something goes wrong because all of them now it will go side by side. So we set the flex direction to column, because for default the flex direction is on row, so it tries to put everything inside one row. So if we set that to column, now everything is back to normal, but the difference is we can now use gap. So let's use the same gap here, and here we can see now there is a little bit of gap between them, and also we are going to give it a little bit of border radius, okay, and the border radius is going to be 4 pixels. So this is how 4 pixels looks like, and the way that I calculate this 4 pixel and rem is that I say 16 pixels is 1 em or 1 rem. And so since 16 pixel is 1 rem, so this is going to be 1/4 of a 1/4 of 1. This is 1/4 of 1. So this is how I calculate it. But if you don't like this rem thing, you can continue with pixels if you want to. But there are so many benefits to this rem. For example, one benefit for rem is that, for example, you've seen some people. For example, let's go to the Google Chrome setting. Let's just mention something really quick, so now you know why this rem thing is better in general than pixels. For example, let's say font size. For the default font size, sorry, this is its font size. The default font size for Google Chrome is 16 pixels. The medium is 16 pixels, as you can see. And you can see there's a small, very small, large, and if that is changed, or in mobile devices, for example, in your grandma's computer, it's probably going to be large and very large. And for those devices, it changes accordingly if we use rem. But if we use pixels, those settings, for example, that are applied in other places won't, because we force that to be, for example, 2 pixels, or force that to be something. But if we use rem, then we are not going to force that to be something, and it's going to be relative. So this is the question if we are going to use for border width. Some people say that no, for border width go ahead and use pixels, and for border radius go ahead and use pixels, because we want that to be the same. But for this case, I'm going to continue with rem. I think it doesn't affect to this. I think it's better to use rem in general, because font size doesn't affect the border width and border radius in general. Okay, so Now that we have this, there's another thing that I want to change. I want to change the, for example, text transform to uppercase for inputs. So let's change the text transform as well, because we can do that with JavaScript as well. But I think using CSS in this case is more convenient, because we want to just show it at uppercase here. And now text transform, the display looks like uppercase. But let's make the padding a little less, 1.25. I think 1.25 is better. But the problem of this way that we have used, for example, for a character like I, we need the padding left to be more. But for a character like C, we need the padding to be less and things like that. So we must use a better way rather than padding left, and we will use, don't worry, because this padding left that we have used is good for some characters but bad for some other characters, because with padding left, if we try to make that centerized, it's not gonna work well. We will come back and fix this for sure, don't worry. So, and this is it. I think everything is great, everything is good to go. So we can actually commit our changes and see you in the next session. Let me think if there is anything that we can do before finishing this session. Nah, I don't think so. I think everything is great. So we took another step in creating that Wordle project, and as I told you, whenever you're working on a project, just break that project into smaller pieces and fragments. For now, we just statically designed the inputs and work with that. Then we add buttons to submit the form, and we may go to backend and write the backend. So step by step, fragment by fragment. So this is the key to write any application. So this is it. That's enough for this session. Hope to see you in the next one.